Hey everyone, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Am I audible?
Yes, Rahul.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. My name is Karthik. I'll be an instructor for this course for API testing. Right. We'll wait for a couple of minutes for people to join, then we'll start. So with respect to context of starting this course, I just wanted to understand the background of the people. Right? I can see one or two people who have joined previously for this session. Is anyone like totally new to API or have joined the first time this course? Can you post it in the chat? New to API, is it? If you are new to API, you can say new to API testing and all those things. Okay. So I also wanted to understand like how many years of experience you have. You're a working professional, you're a college student or something like that. Can you say me, and what kind of domain are you working? You're QA or you are trying to be a QA professional, or what it is? And if someone is employed, can you like say like your years of experience, for my understanding? Okay, okay. Okay, okay, I'm getting the context. Okay. Let me give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Karthik Raja. I work in a company called Freshworks. I hope you might have recently heard of that name. We went IPO in US hashtag recently. We are B2B SaaS company, and I'm a part-time trainer for weight automation here. Right. So I have over 7 years of experience totally in an IT field. Initially, I was in QA field for about 5.5 years. Right. Recently, I switched to development in the company which I work for. Okay. So in QA perspective, I worked in both manual and automation, Selenium APIs, Cucumber, and automation frameworks and all those things. With respect to development, I currently work in Java Spring based frameworks, Spring Hibernate, and SQL and NoSQL databases, right? Like and other tech stacks like Kafka, Cassandra, Elasticsearch, Redis, and all those things. Able to see the screen, everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, see, before jumping directly into inbuilt things of APIs and all those things, right? And also that some of the tools which we'll be covering over the course of this, over the period of this course. I believe that getting in-depth knowledge about what is happening with respect to client and server and client-server architecture is very important, so that it is very easy to understand going forward what is actually happening in an API. Right? I am currently doing in backend web development. We mainly deal with APIs in the server side, right? So once you catch hold of what is an API, how it is working, and how we can leverage all these tools to better do an API testing, right? To do that, two things are important. First, you have to obviously have to understand concepts of API. Other thing which is equally important is how the backend architecture is implemented in whatever applications that you're working on. Please get to know that. We'll see what are those things over the period of this course. Okay. So before jumping into this, I want to start with this basic of client-server architecture. So let's make this session a little interactive. So I wanted to understand from you people also. We would have all would have obviously studied this client-server architecture, and even in our professional world, we would have encountered this term more often, right? So what is this? What is a client-server architecture actually? You can post it in chat, or you can unmute yourself and you can talk also. Any idea?
Hi, this is Nikhil. Yeah, hi, this is Nikhil.
Yeah, hi, Nikhil.
Client-server architecture, mentions about interaction of two machines, and one of these machines is sending some request, and other machine is there to serve that request.
Right, right. So across the internet, we all get and send some data, right? So how it is made possible? There are many technologies for that. Most common thing is via APIs, right? So what happens is we have something called client, which is nothing but, let's say, can we say a browser as a client? You can say, right? Browser examples, Chrome, Firefox, and all those things. Can we say a mobile app as a client?
Excuse
mobile
me.
Application?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes, please.
Sorry to ask this question. How long the session will go on?
It will be until 6 p.m. Here. It will be going on until 7:45.
2 hours, right?
Right.
Okay. Continue. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry for interrupting.
No problem.
Will this video be available in the link after that?
Yes. It is recorded. Rahul will be providing the link for you. Okay.
Where it will be available?
He'll be providing that Zoom Cloud meeting link where you can have this password access link to access this video.
Can you please mail me my ID? Can I give my ID? Can you please mail me?
There is some WhatsApp group, right, Aisha? You can post there. Rahul will respond, or you can.
I don't have. I'm not in the WhatsApp group. I'm an old student. I'm an old student. I'm not a current user.
Okay, not a problem. You have Rahul's contact, right? Rahul is managing all this.
I don't know to whom I contacted. I don't have any contact now. Right now, I have nothing.
Okay, let us discuss this in the end of the session. Okay.
Achha, okay, thank you.
Okay, coming back, right? Can we say this mobile app as a client? Yes or no? And if talking is not comfortable, you can post it in chat also.
I think no.
Okay, the answer is yes. See, the client is something which is going to send some requests and get some response back, or even post some data to the server, so that new data is saved into our database, right? So anything which does that is a client, right? You can consider that also a client. See, I am using a Mac machine. Okay, there is something called curl. Have you heard of this term called curl? Okay, let's forget about the curl part. Can I call this terminal as a client?
Yes.
Yes, it is a client. It is also a client, right? Because through your terminal, you will be able to send the request to your servers, right? So it's not about browser or any specific thing that you are imagining. Anything, any piece of code which you is able to send a particular request to server and get a response is called as a client, right? I think you would have gone through the I mean, how many people have gone through the syllabus of this course actually, or do I need to show you at the end of the session? Obviously, we are going to cover Postman and rest assured and all those things. Okay. So, what about Postman? And what about rest assured? Okay, no problem. We'll have a look at general overview of what are the course contents. So, other examples are Postman is a tool, right? For example, we have a Postman here. This is a tool which is used to send and organize all your requests as a collections and manage your API requests better, right? So that can be also called as a client, right? Someone was asking, like, are we going to cover SOAP UI? No. I'll say what is the reason, right? SOAP UI is like almost outdated. 95% of the tech now moved towards REST APIs, right? SOAP is not part of this syllabus. Okay. So what is this rest assured then? Rest assured is a piece of code. It's a Java library used to send and receive a request from the server, right? So can we call this as a client?
Yes.
Yes. Right. So it's not only about graphical UI like browser that we call as a client. Any piece of code or any piece of software that is able to send or receive a request, we call that as a client. It's the first thing we need to understand, right? So now the next thing, now we know who is sending the request, right? Now we should know what type of request is that, right? Obviously, you would have heard this term called HTTP request, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. The general typical an API request will be in the form of an HTTP request where it has some standard protocols. We'll cover all those things later, like get request, post request, put and delete, and all those things are there. Okay? Basic standard API operations. We'll cover all those things. But my question is HTTP request only for only form of request?
No, there can be many types of requests.
So can you give me some other examples?
HTTPS.
Even
Yes.
Java are also type of request.
HTTPS is secured. You need some SSL certificate and you are transferring the content securely from your client to server. That is fine. Someone was saying some other example.
TCP, FTP.
Yes, TCP, FTP. Yes, there is something called WS. How many of you have heard this protocol called WS? Yeah, Pat. Okay, WS is WebSockets. We'll cover this in a brief little later. TCP we know transfer control protocol, FTP is file transfer protocol, HTTPS is secured HTTP protocol, right? So communication can be it is a standard set of defined rules over like a particular sequence of data or in the particular format or particular structure wherein we communicate via internet, right? So the main scope of this syllabus is to cover HTTP requests, right? Typically it will be get, put, post, delete. There are other requests also, something like options, head. We'll see how all those things. What is the significance of each and everything, right, in detail as we progress through the course. Now, and let's say I'm going to trigger an HTTP request, right? Let's say we have something called get request. So can anyone say me what is the purpose of a get request?
Get is used to request data from a specified resource.
Right. We are requesting data but how will that particular server which is reading this data knows what type of data that we are requesting? Okay, we'll come to that part. So, but general understanding is that get is used to get data from somewhere. Let's call it somewhere. Okay, it's used to get some data from some location and it is going to present to you in some format. Now, what is that format? Someone was posting, right? Is JSON? Yes, JSON is one of the format. XML. And what are the other formats? Can you
HTML also?
Yes, HTML is possible. And
Plain text.
yes, plain text.
CSV.
Yes, CSV. Can we transfer a binary file? What is a binary file?
File having format in 1 and 0s.
On a like a very abstract meaning is that, but generally can we call image and files as a binary file? Image and videos and all those things. Those are binary files, right? So that is also possible. So it's not only limited to JSON or XML format that typically we see in request, right? The other types of contents also can be transferred or received through an HTTP request, right? The SOAP will be received only XML formats, whereas support JSON format also. So this is the first understanding we need to get. Right? So many types of data can be sent and received via an HTTP request. It's not only JSON or XML alone. Now, but what is the common format, like most frequently used maybe?
JSON.
Obviously JSON. But why? Why we reached XML and went to JSON?
Easy to understand.
Lightweight.
And one more important purpose is there actually for JSON. Any answers?
Lightweight.
Lightweight, yes, to extent correct.
I think only one easy to understand. Easy to write.
One more very inherent advantage is there with respect to JSON. The name itself implies that. JSON is a JavaScript object notation, right? So what do you mean by that? So
can we restart between two calls? Means if we get any discrepancy, if we get any like stop, that it has the power to restart.
No, I don't know what you exactly.
Okay, stateless means okay.
No. See, we are sending and receiving a data in certain format, right? Maybe we can send in JSON or XML, HTML, whatever it is. But JSON is also one such structure, right? For example, see, this is a typical example of a JSON, right? Actually, so I can just like developer is there. Okay, see the answer. So typical advantage of JSON is
structured.
See, it's not about the structure. Even XML files are structured, right? The advantage being it is a default object creation protocol for a JavaScript library. Right? It's a JavaScript object notation. It comes from JavaScript world, right? Why this is important? Because see, whenever we are using some web applications, right, browser and all those things, JavaScript is a go-to language. You don't know, right? Browser uses JavaScript, right or not? What is a basic component of a web browser or web page? HTML, CSS, and I hope you are aware of the three basic components of a web page, right? So sending a JavaScript data to a server and reading the JavaScript data from which is received from the server is very easy, because in the browser is very easy because browser itself uses JavaScript, right? So go to default variable creation or object creation structure in JavaScript is JSON, right? So only people went to JSON, right? It is also easy to parse and use, and also it's a go-to default for a JavaScript based language, which is mostly used in browsers, right? Right or not? I mean, you're getting the point. Why JSON is kind of we moved from XML to JSON. Let's say you are sending an XML, right? JavaScript has to process that XML. For that, you have to have a separate JavaScript library for that. You have to process that XML and you have to get the data out of that. Whereas if it's a JSON data, which is coming from the server, you don't need to process the data at all. JavaScript knows, by default, JavaScript knows to handle the JSON data, right? That's one very big advantage. And see, when we say APIs, right, typically people give this, that's true, people give this example, right? When two systems communicates, maybe one system is written in JavaScript, another system is written in Java, another in Python, and all those things. There has to be common medium of data, common structure of data, so that both parties can understand easily, right? So that medium or that structure is called JSON. There's a dead silence. I hope I'm not boring or doing too much. Okay.
Got it.
Now, we know the data is JSON. We know this type of data can be sent over a request. And there are various things that are happening in between. Send a request that is sent from a client and the response is back. We call that as an OSI ISO layer, right? I'm not going to go deep into that. Just reading that we would have obviously studied in school and college days, right? There are many application presentation session and transport and security. All those layers are there. All your requests passes through all those layers in the internet, right? And finally, it comes to a place called server. Now, when I was studying in the college, I used to, when I hear the term called server, I used to think like something very big is going on and happening. So I want to understand your perspective, like what is a server?
Hi, Nikhil here. See, server can be any application which is capable of understanding the protocol and responding back to the request. So it's a piece of application actually.
Okay, true, right? Server is a piece of application, but that's one half of the explanation. Okay? Piece of application or library or code, right? Or code which is written to handle certain requests, right? Someone have answered server means DB. No, server is not DB, right? DB is different. We'll talk about that. This piece of application or code is one part of the answer. What is the other part?
Where we can store our data, or where we can store our things that we wanted back through protocols or through.
That is the work of a DB, right? Server plus DB forms a complete backend infrastructure. We'll come to the DB part a little later, right? But,
server is like where we host our application.
Right. So server is a piece of code plus a machine on which this piece of code is running, right? Getting a point. So server, when we think of server, we used to like you have obviously seen these images, I guess, right, in various movies, and let me show you that. Have you seen these rooms? Have you seen these images? It's a typical server room. Okay. So what are these things at the end of the day? It's just a computer running. There are like tens and thousands of computers which are connected together via network and logically grouped together via a piece of a software called hypervisor. We call that as a virtualization, right? How many of you know this like virtualization, hypervisor, and all those things? No? Are you able to see the image actually that I'm showing you?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are nothing but these are individual computers with a raw like whatever we have, typical home PC or laptop, right? With a hard disk for storage, with a processor for processing, right? And with a RAM for memory. But it doesn't have a screen, right? It doesn't have a particular like screen that monitor or whatever it is, or a keyboard, whatever it is. Keyboard will be there. But to log into a particular computer, we will need a particular computer console. We call this a typical computing world. We call this a terminal, right? Server terminal, right? So we can log in via this terminal, right? It will look something similar to this, right? I can log into a computer via this particular terminal itself, and I can access these file systems not via graphical user interface (GUI), but via commands. For example, this is a typical terminal window. How many of you used Linux or Mac kind of environment actually? This is a particular folder which I'm currently in. If I give pwd command, it's going to show me the path where the particular folder I'm currently currently residing in. If I say ls, it's going to show me the list of files and folders, and you can navigate. You can do everything whatever you're doing in a UI via your command line itself, right? So we are going to access these computers via command line. So typically, server is a computer only with hardware, but it's a huge number of hardwares connected together via network. That network we call as a VPC, virtual private cloud, and all those things are there. And this network is managed by a software called hypervisor. Okay. And inside that particular computer, a hard drive, we run this server-side code. Right? Typically, this server-side code is created with, let's say, in the Java world, we create with Java Spring library. In Python, we have libraries like Flask, Django. In Node.js, in Node world we have Node.js, right? And in Ruby we have ROR, Ruby on Rails, right? So typically, a server-side code will be created with any one of these language. And I was talking about the request that is triggered from the client, right? An API request. That API request, it will go through all the ISO OSI networks and through the internet. It will come to a server machine, and that particular server machine will have two ports generally open. Any computer will have ports, right? Port PORT. The two ports which will be generally opened for the internet is ET port and the 443. What's the difference between these two? Any answers?
80, I guess. 80 number port, I guess we use for HTTPS requests, and 443, I don't remember.
80 is for HTTP, okay? And 443 is for HTTPS. Okay. So this particular server, this particular request will come to this particular machine, this server computer, through this port. And in this port, the piece of software or application code that is running will be listening to this either one of these port, or 80 port or 443 port, for any incoming request. If anyone is coming, anyone request is coming through these ports, this request will be forwarded to the application code that is running. Application code will process that request and is responsible for sending the response back to the client. Right? This is how a typical API call works. Right? Any confusion in whatever things I said currently? No?
Hello?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had a doubt that this port number which you told just now, I do not have any idea about this. That's why I'm asking. So is it fixed always that 80 will be the case of HTTP and 443 will be?
You can configure it, but it is a standard. Right? Wherever you go, this 80 is for HTTP, 443 is HTTPS. You can go into the root deep kernel and you can modify it, but it's not advisable. This is a standard which is established across internationally, so that it's acceptable everywhere. Right? This is a standard.
Okay, so it's like when I create a website, so it will always, so the port will be default by 80 if it is HTTPS, and otherwise 443 if it is HTTPS, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
Now, what usually happens is there is something called this request is coming from the client, right? A browser or mobile app or whatever. It will not directly, it will pass through all the internet and all those things. It will not directly come to the server machine, right? In between this like request and response and internet, just after the internet part, there is something called load balancer. And heard of this term?
Yes.
Yes. Again, you can load balancer is kind of a combination of mostly software and hardware part, which is going to redirect your request to n number of servers, a number of machines where the server code is residing, right? So the work of load balancer is to minimize the load to any one particular machine. It's not like only one server is going to serve your request, right? There may be 10 servers, there may be 20 servers, there may be thousands of servers which is going to serve your request. What is the, let's say we are all using Facebook, right? What is the typical number of server, let's say Facebook might use? Any guesses? Any approximate guesses?
No idea.
I would safely say it is over 10,000. So it is not like only one machine is going to serve your request. There are thousands and 10,000s of machines across all the regions. It's going to serve your request, right? Now, the servers is going to be connected something like this, right? Actually, it's a logical grouping. There is a very big area, right? Actually, these servers are connected. And generally, we call that as a region, right? Server region, right? If you typically see, you can even Google it. Where are the servers available, right? USA has most number of servers, server regions, right? Followed by Europe. In India, where do you think servers are there? Mumbai and
Kolkata.
Bangalore. And Kolkata and other places doesn't have any extensive server farms like Mumbai and Bangalore, right?
Okay.
It has something called CDNs. We'll come to that a little later. So when I am accessing a particular Facebook, let's say I'm going to access my Facebook page, right? It's going to trigger some request to the server, and server is going to respond. It is going to come from since I'm in India, I'm going to come from servers which is either in Bangalore or Mumbai. Right? What if I'm accessing the same Facebook page when I'm traveling abroad? Let's say I'm accessing a Facebook page via USA. In USA, right? In that case, the particular request is going to serve from the USA server, right? So the thing we need to understand is whatever server that is very near to us, the request will be processed and served from that particular server location only. But where this data is stored, for example, I'm accessing Facebook or WhatsApp and all those things are there. Leave WhatsApp for now. Let's take Instagram example. I'm posting the photos, or in Facebook, I'm posting the content, right? So whenever I log in, all these contents are readily available for me in my profile. Whenever my friends post something, it is available for me. So where are these data there? How the server is able to fetch the right data for me every time I log in?
In database, we request when we request and we get data from server, data is saved in DB, so we hit the server and server responds with the hitting by database.
Right. So server will read the request, and it is going to fetch the data from a database, and that data is coming from the database, and server is going to convert that into the right format for you and return it back to the client, right? Now, what can be the databases?
Oracle.
Oracle.
SQL Server.
SQL, MySQL.
There's something called MySQL. It's very famous actually. Famous SQL Server is there. DB2 is there. Yes, I've worked in previously worked in IBM. When came to CTS, now in Freshworks. So now I'll come to MongoDB. Postgre is there. So what are these databases? These are called
These are like structured.
A collection of the data, tables.
SQL database. Table format, right? These databases are called SQL databases, right?
Yeah.
There are very two broad categories of database. One is SQL, yeah, RDM is relational database, right? Where we store some relational data. For example, let's say you are registering in same example, Facebook, right? You will submit your first name, last name, email ID, and password and all those things, and maybe your address and contact information if you're running some business. These are called relational data, right? I can relate your user information to your user account, right? If I'm posting some raw content, some basic text content, right? I can relate that content to your user ID. These are called relational data, right? So it's better to store this data in a relational databases like MySQL and Oracle SQL and all those things, Postgres and all those things, right? But there are also something called NoSQL database. Typical example is MongoDB. How many of you have heard of this NoSQL databases term or something new for you people?
I don't have.
NoSQL. Someone says working on it. Great. So how a MongoDB stores data?
In document form.
Document format. Nothing like a typical JSON format, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unstructured.
So, I would not say it's unstructured. I would say it is not relational, right? So when I say relational, right, in MySQL and SQL, where there is something called primary keys and foreign keys relationship, right? How many of you worked with relationships? So in one column of one table, you can join with another column of the other table by querying, right? I mean, I hope you know the basics of SQL queries and all those things. Okay. So like that, you can like query the other table with a relation, whereas in NoSQL database that is not possible. Okay. If you want to query some data, you can just query in that table only. You cannot join another table and query the data while combining both the tables. So you have to design your, yes, it's an API, but you have to design your particular thing in a particular API in such a way or particular database in such a way that you are going to fetch the right kind of data for you, right? Another NoSQL databases example, anyone? Have you heard of this database called Cassandra, one of my favorite database? Cassandra, anyone heard? It's a very interesting database. If you have time, please explore. All right. To understand API, it's very important to understand how a database works. Right? Cassandra is a wide column database. Someone raised the hand. Pavan, I guess. Any question you have? No.
What do you mean by wide column database?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
See, when you insert some data into a SQL DB, how the data is stored? It's stored as a rows, right? For example, I have an ID, first name, last name, and email, something like that. These columns are there. If I insert one data, it will be stored like this, right? One and something from Jerry, some email, tom@gmail.com. Okay, right? If I wanted to put some another data, I have to like insert another row, right?
Yes.
So, but in a wide column database, it's very interesting actually. It will not be stored as a row. Instead, the same data will be stored as a column itself, like this. Right? I'm just giving you a very high level example, right? And if you wanted to insert a third data, it will be stored like this. So it's not stored as a row, instead it's stored as a column, right? So only we call it as a wide column database. I'm just giving a very high level example. We are not going to go deep into Cassandra. It's a very big topic. Very interesting topic actually. If you explore Cassandra. It's a very interesting database to learn if you want. And many top companies use this Cassandra database actually. Facebook developed it and open sourced it. Google, Facebook, Amazon, and most of the tops of the companies uses Cassandra data. Okay, Cassandra it is, and there is something called Redis. It's a key value pair catching mechanism. We can call it as a one kind of NoSQL database, and there is something called Elasticsearch. It's a database come search engine, right? You can put any data into that particular database, and it is also going to act as a search engine for you. Right? These are typical examples of like NoSQL databases. Right? So each database will store data in a certain format. That doesn't matter. So these are also existing. So a server's work is to take the database from a SQL or NoSQL kind of environment, convert it to a right format, JSON or whatever format, and sends it back to the client. Right now, our databases are only source of information. Can it be something else? Files, okay. Files, it's okay. Let me come to this part. Storing typical raw data like text and JSON structure is fine, right? But what if I want to store an image or a video? Can I store it in MongoDB, or can I store it in MySQL or Oracle SQL? A raw image and video. We don't generally store that, right? Technically, it is possible, but we don't do that because, okay, before going to that, where we store these images and videos actually. Have you heard of something called AWS, Amazon Web Services?
Yes.
Give an example. There's something called S3, right? Someone has posted the answer. So S3 is a simple storage service which is going to implement your file storing protocols, right? So it is going to store the actual raw binary data in a particular location inside S3. Every S3 will have some endpoints or URL to access that, either through authentication or you can make it as a public URL, right? Now this particular database is going to contain that endpoint on, right? That URL where this particular photo or image or video is located. So once you hit that, your browser is responsible for going to the S3 location, download that image for you and render it to you in the browser, right? It's not responsible for a database to store the raw binary data as such, right? We are going to store in something like S3. I'll give you an Amazon example, S3. Similarly, other like things will have other examples also. Like maybe some other cloud providers like Azure will have some other storage mechanisms, and GCP will have some other storage mechanisms implemented, right? So typically AWS S3 is very famous. Right? So data can be served from this S3 kind of locations also. Let's say I'm having one server. It's going to which I have created. Can this server communicate to some other server in the internet, totally different server developed by different party, and get the data from this server, and this server will respond. Server, let's say this called the server 1. Okay, this is server 2, and this client is going to communicate with server 1. Can the server 1 communicate with server 2 and get the data for you? Yes, that is also possible.
Yes.
Server to server communication is also possible. That is also one way of getting the data, right? And typically for these purposes also, your typical HTTP requests are going to be used. And what about other locations? Where else can you fetch the data from? You can fetch the data from SQL database, NoSQL database, storage locations like S3, from other servers, any other thing. Anything that you can think of. What about something called CDNs? Anyone aware of this term called CDN? content delivery network. Anyone heard this term? CDNs are nothing but a catching mechanism. For example, I always typically give this example to relate, right? And they, I hope everyone has this Netflix or Amazon Prime account, I guess. Right? Where these movies are stored in Netflix, we can put it in a location like S3. Obviously, it's a video data. We can put it in S3. And I'm assuming this particular Amazon servers are only in Mumbai and Bangalore. What if you are in somewhere in the Northeast, in Assam or Nagaland or whatever? There are also Netflix services available if you have internet. Is it viable that this data is served from Mumbai or Bangalore all the way towards Northeast? Right? Is it a good thing to do? And if not, why? Any answers? No answers. See, I'm not the only person who's going to use Netflix services, right? There might be hundreds of users in my location who might be having Netflix account, and let's say all the persons are using Netflix at the same time, right? Maybe 10% watches the same movie or maybe different movie. But how much capacity can the server handle? If all the hundreds of people request the data at the same time, will the server be able to handle? If you use multiple servers, maybe yes. But what about the network delay, latency? Video data is a very huge MBs and GBs of data, right? We want to transfer all the data, and we have a typical hard limit, speed limit of speed of light, right, to transmit the data over fiber optics. Anyway, it will be delayed. Your move will be buffering and buffering and buffering, right? And the user experience will be bad. So typically what people do is, initial request will be served from the server, maybe in Mumbai or Bangalore, and it will know where to redirect your further request to. The other request will be coming to a place called CDN, which might be just 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers away from you, right? The CDNs are caching mechanism, typically caches to store your frequently used data. For example, I think this particular web series last season released today, I guess, right? What is that? Money Heist, right? So Money Heist is released yesterday, so many people are going to watch the Money Heist, right? So it's that is a very popular TV show currently in Netflix. So what Netflix people do is take the Money Heist episodes or video and put it across multiple locations in India. That location is called CDN, right? Content Delivery Network. Amazon AWS also has one such CDN services. I think it's called CloudFront. Yes, AWS we call it as a CloudFront. Yes, Akama is one such CDN services. Right? So people put all these data in to the nearest location to you, so that this video is served from the location that is very near to you, instead of hitting the every time you serve from the Bangalore on right. So data can be served from the CDNs also. Now again, server will take this and give it back to the client. Now, one small trivia, maybe it's not that much related to what we are going to see. A small question to you all. Do you think if I'm requesting some movie which is going to run for 2.5 hours, all the 2.5 hours data is directly starting to streaming to me? Or what is happening actually? Any idea?
I guess it will initially download some part on the local machine.
Yes, an entire movie will not be downloaded, right? The movie will be split to multiple parts, multiple chunks of small data, and if you see, the data is constantly downloaded. Yeah. And have anyone explored this something called this network tab? Anyone? Have you worked on those things?
Yeah. Yes.
Obviously, you would have seen this elements tab, right? It's a HTML DOM structure. What is this console used for?
It's give me
Developer log.
it gives me error like JavaScript error kind of thing.
Yes. So whatever front-end errors or whatever front-end
Exactly.
things are happening, you can see all the logs here, right? Even I can typically execute a JavaScript command here, right?
Right.
It will give you suggestions of the document. Right? So I can execute the command as the URL is the same. Right? So this is one such a JavaScript command. So I can execute a JavaScript command also here. Now, what is the sources tab then? What is the source tab? I was talking about the CDNs, right? All the static contents, images, and all those things will be loaded in the sources tab. Anyone explored these things? Actually? All the static contents will be loaded in the sources tab, right? Or typical JavaScript, CSS files, images, or what else these images is actually loaded. Right? This is a JS file actually. Right? It's loaded. So now coming to network. Network tab is typically where you see your API calls. Right or not?
Yes.
So what is this XHR then? What leave the all? What is we come to this XHR? But what is this XHR? XHR is XML HTTP request, right? What is specifically think about in XHR? Why it is kind of needed? So think with that XHR. I've heard of themes this thing called Ajax request. Anyone? No.
Yes, we hit from the eject for getting page doesn't load anymore.
I
If
think
we,
Yes.
it will work like hidden objects.
See, I can give you this cricket example actually, right? When I go to this page, Google typically, this page, I don't have to refresh every time to see a data, right or not? As and when the match happens, this data will be constantly updated. But I don't see any page refreshing and all those things. How it is possible actually?
due to Ajax hit.
Yes. So this Google triggers an Ajax. Ajax is nothing but the HTTP request, which is not triggered at the time of loading the page, but at the time of any particular event happening and all those things, right? Only on all particular thing, Ajax call triggers, and only the particular section of web page where the data needs to be updated will only be refreshed, not the entire page, right? Those are called Ajax calls. And in the technical term, we call those as an XHR calls, right? So page doesn't have to be reloaded every time to get all the data. Only a particular section of websites will be updated based on the Ajax trigger that is going to happen from the JavaScript that the page might have. So if we click on this, obviously we have this request URL, right? So people who are not working can go on new pages. See, I have this endpoint or URL in front of me, right? Let's break it into different components, right, to understand the APIs better. Now, this is protocol, we all know, right? What is this part called? This part of an URL called?
Endpoint.
Not endpoint.
Base URL.
This is a domain, right? Google.com is a domain, right or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How particular, if I hit google.com, how the Google homepage is loaded, anyone knows how what is actually happening in the background? This is a domain name, right?
Basically,
We typically, yes,
IP address kind of thing, right, sir?
right.
Think about an IP address, and it is wrapped fashionably so that it is easily readable by the people like outside the code world, so that everybody can remember like HTTP colon www. But it's
how,
something like IP address, like
right. But how, for example, google.com will have a particular IP address tagged to it. But how a browser or anyone knows, but hey, hit this API if I hit google.com, what is actually happening? Hit this IP if I hit google.com in my browser. Yes, DNS server is there, right? So there is something called, first, if you want to register your website, you have to buy some domain from DNS registrar, and you have to configure some DNS records. Okay? And your IP will be tagged against your DNS name, and it will be resolved either through your internet service provider. For frequently accessed websites, there will be some catching done at the ISP level. Your internet service provider will have this IP information. If not, it will go to the typical internet, and it will try to find the IPs. At various catching mechanisms will be there to find the right IP for your website. Right. After all these things, your browser will know this is the right IP to target. Request will be redirected to that IP, and it will be fetching the response from the server and back. So many things are happening in the back end. So this is called domain. Right? Now, what is this part called? Part which I'm highlighting. Until this actually resources, right? Or otherwise, resources, right? Because this is a kind of data that server will understand, so that it knows what kind of data I'm requesting, right? So we can call it as a resource. Otherwise, yeah, someone posted endpoint, right? This is actually an endpoint. Endpoint is something which we have to provide for the server to let that know that, hey, this is the data that I'm requesting for. Right? And what about this part? What are these things?
This thing is like a encrypted data and encrypted font for which we are requesting.
No, URL
Parameters.
Yes. These are query parameters, right? Query parameter will typically start after this question mark, and we have key value pairs. Key will be usually before this equal to symbol, and value will be usually after this equal to symbol. If you wanted to have multiple query parameters, you can append with ampersand symbol, right? But why do we need this query parameter? That's my question.
To locate exactly.
Yes. See, locate exactly, more specifically, if you wanted to say, search exactly. Right? Yeah. I'm giving this, right? But what if you wanted to pass additional information to server to fine focus or fine tune the search that I wanted to do in the server and get the data back, right? So to fine tune our search, we make use of this query parameters. Okay. So there might be other components also, such that port, some service you might use port, generally 8080 port. Right? This is a port that might be, you might use, and you might have seen something like this in any URL. You might see this hash symbol, and they might have given some image or whatever. Have you seen this hash symbol somewhere? Yes, right. What is this hash symbol used for in URL? Any idea?
Yes, when we have to redirect on the same page, suppose we are clicking on any link and it is redirected on the same page, we use the hash symbol for that.
Right. But technically, yes, you're correct. But what is happening? How it is redirecting to the particular block on the same page? You are right, actually. But why? How?
If there is any no dedicated data for any redirection, so in this case we use hash parameter for the same page to avoid any crash, to avoid any extra redirection, I think.
Okay, it's not that. you said, right, it will be redirected to any particular block on the website. How it is doing is like that particular every block will have a ID associated with it. You see in the DOM structure, right? ID is not compulsory, but you might have seen the ID actually, right? If you go to this elements tab.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the ID.
Yes.
Yes, obviously, you know, right? ID and all those things. I think it's.
Yes, like
Yeah,
ID of any
yeah,
type.
yeah. See, this ID is there. The ID is LB here. So when I say hash LB, that means I'm saying, hey, directly go to this element where this particular page, I mean, go to the particular area in the particular web page where this element is located. So only if you hit hash and put some ID there, it is able to automatically scroll down and navigate to the particular element in the particular web page.
Right.
That's actually ID of the particular element in the DOM. Can you give me 2 minutes of time? I'll be back. Hey everyone. So these are typical components of an API and URL and all those things, right? Now we have all these URL parts, right? Someone was asking a question. Okay, generally 80 port is a port which is going to be exposed to the outside internet to be able to hit a particular entry point of any HTTP request. 8080 is a port where you run an application server. We'll talk about all those. You have heard of this term called Tomcat server, anyone? Tomcat is a web server. It's going to handle all your requests, right? Okay, I'll also talk about the flow actually, right? Any request comes, right? It is going to pass through the internet, right? It is triggered from the client. And goes through the internet. And it comes to, generally in a real world application, it comes to something called load balancer. We talked about what's a load balancer, right? And it goes to that particular machine where the particular application is running to 80 port, that's a server machine. Initially, it will go to a place called a Webservice. Right? Web server is a container or a wrapper or a where inside which the application is going to run, right? So initially, it's not like an application that you piece of code that you write is directly going to be like coming. The request is going to directly come to the code and all. Initially, it will come to something called web server. In this example, we can take an example of Tomcat. What is another example? Famous any famous web server that you might think of? Have you heard of something called Nginx? Okay. No. So this web server is responsible for listening to that AT or Jetty. Right? Jetty is something you are going to integrate this Java with Gretty. Gretty is one kind of Jetty is one kind of server, web server, that's right. But in typical usage, we integrate along with Gradle or Maven, and we call it as a Gretty. Right? Gradle, whatever. Yes, it's an example of web server. So this web server is responsible for handling all these requests and is going to redirect to a request to your application server that is running in, say, the container of web server. In typical Tomcat example, we package your entire application, server application, into a jar or war file. In case of Java, jar or war packaging, right? Java archive, web archive file. Usually, you want to deploy into a server, it will be a web archive file, right? And you will be putting that file into a Tomcat's web apps folder. It's very interesting to work on all these things. If you are not tried out as a QA professional, please do try it out. Installing and running a Tomcat is very, very easy. Right? And once you installed this war file inside a web apps folder, when you run this, Tomcat is responsible for like decrypt or whatever to do with our file and put it into a folder structure that we wanted to have right inside the particular web apps folder. It will decrypt into again back to the folder structure, right? And it will be able to access all the class files. In case in example, that's a class files right inside that particular folder. Right? I hope you are aware of how Java works. Where Java is going to compile all your files to class files, Java files into class files, and that will be run in your JVM. Okay. Now, so always this flow is very, very important to understand. It's not a straightforward flow through from client through internet as HTTP request to load balancers to your server machine and to web servers, then to your app server. Then this app server is responsible for fetching the data from the database or whatever. Then it returns back to the client. This much is happening, but it's happening in the matters of milliseconds actually. Right? So if you see this, you can see the status, right? Status, what's the protocol, what type of request is that? See this HTML request or ping etc. request or whatever it is. You can see the size. You can see the time. Let's see. This much things are happening. It is just taking just 137 or 240 milliseconds only. And all those things are there. And if you find them, please explore other blocks as well, performance memory blocks as well. I'm not going to cover a very in-depth into that. But network understand network tab is very, very important. Okay. So now, what is the status code? Why it is important? Any idea?
$200 is for success.
Yes, 200 is for success. But generally, what's the status code?
Whenever we hit on any particular URL, it's give the status code, whether it is successful, whether it is not successful, whether it is error. So in terms of this status code, dedicated status, we can get to know that where is the means, is there any error or it is okay or success.
Right, right. So it's a simple and straightforward way of knowing that whether our API is successful or not. Right? If I get 200, it's successful. Just wait a minute, I'm getting important call. Hey, sorry for that. So the status code is a very simple and straightforward way of knowing whether our request, whatever we did, is intended done in the right way or not, right? So typically 202 or let's say 2xx, right? Typically, like it's for a success response. 200 is for success. 204 is for 200 that are. This Mozilla website is very good actually. So 201 is for created. Whenever you wanted to create any record inside your database, then server will probably return a 201. So that we know, hey, it's also success, but it's also created. Right? And this request accepted. And 204, it's okay. I know the request, but there is no content. Similarly, multiple status codes in 2xx series will have multiple purposes, right? But generally, success responses are 2xx series. So what about 3xx? What is this 3 series used for?
And I have one question. Can I ask?
Mhm.
Sometimes I saw API error. It is
Okay.
not showing any status code also.
API error in the sense like even what library you are using, the structure or like what kind of
So
base you
pure.
have something. So pure. Might be due to multiple reasons. Yeah. I'm not typically sure. I have to see what kind of thing is that. Even if server is not at all working, then you will get a response as 502 or 503. If whatever resource you're looking is not at all there, you will get 404. Right? There might be some configurations issues or whatever. I have to see to have to comment about that. Okay?
If data not matches, then means if data is wrong, so will we get API error?
No, it depends. For example, if the data, whatever you are sending is wrong from the client, typically it's example of 4xx series, right?
Right.
It's a client-side error. So maybe the API error is you're getting is kind of a message from the server saying that you're having like kind of a wrong data that is sent or whatever. So that's what I'm trying to say. I have to see that actually to understand what is the problem. Right? So talking about 4xx, like we know, right? For example, you talked about bad data that is sent. Typically, we get a 400 generally in these scenarios, right? For data, I have understood your request, but hey, you sent something which is not in acceptable format or wrong kind of data or whatever. We get a 400, right? And 401 unauthorized, obviously. Okay, I'll come to this 4xx series. Before that, I'll talk a little about very briefly about 3xx, right? Have you seen this URL redirection actually moved permanently or whatever? You did not notice most of the times if you see click any link, it will be redirected to another link. One such example is this tiny URL, right? Tiny URL services like Bitly and URL shortener and all those things. Anyone use those things? It's typical redirect example. For example, I can show you another example.
I think you're talking about deep link.
No. Just give a basic example.
Okay.
See, this 7 website has moved to Geo7 now currently the domain. But if I hit 7.com, the response is successful, but it says 301, right? Moved permanently. And it's going to redirect me to another website. That redirection website is called Geo7.com. Right? In this kind of example, the 301 status code is actually returned. You see this location, right? This location is data which is going to tell the browser, hey, this is 301, redirect to this particular website, geo7.com, right? So for redirection purposes and say the website has moved or whatever. So this 3xx is used actually, right? See temporary permanent return, those things. Now coming to 400 series, right? We saw it's a bad request. What is unauthorized?
Because it is we are not authorized to access any API, so it gives error in authentication.
Yes, here only comes the concept of authentication versus authorization, right? Very famous comparison. So what's the difference actually?
Authentication is whether the
Authentication, I think these credentials are not correct.
Authentication.
Regarding the credentials. Authorization is the permission.
Right. So authentication is something, hey, you are able to access something in that particular portal or website. But authorization is something, hey, I have understood you are a user in this platform, but you are not authorized to access particular resource, particular endpoints or particular data, right? That's the difference between authentication and authorization, right? So it's a unauthorized. That means, hey, unauthorized can be like anything. You're not authorized to enter this particular endpoint or domain or whatever data that you are requesting, right? Typically, we require like we send unauthorized. This payment required is kind of future scope. We're not going to talk about that. What is forbidden? Again, similar to 401, right? What's forbidden? Yes. Here the identity is not known. That hey, this particular user identity is not known whether there is right user or not. But in the forbidden, user identity is known, right? But still, he's not having right privileges to access that resource. That's forbidden. 404 very famous status code, I guess. Whatever you are looking for is not found. Right?
I think we can say server is down.
No, 404 is not server down. I was talking about the endpoint actually. Showing you that actually here. Let's say I was accidentally changed something here. Instead of front end UI, typically added some 1 or 2 something like that. What if this endpoint doesn't even exist in the server?
Just want to know, like, say, in a postman, say, it is a basic authentication. I'm giving the correct username and password. But still, in the postman, I'm getting 401 unauthorized. That means our, so in this case, what is the difference between authentication and why I'm getting unauthorized? So can you just clarify, please?
Okay. Before that, I also want to say one thing. Generally, even when I was studying these things, I tend to confuse or tend to be in a kind of bias that certain things do certain operations do certain things only. For example, when we say get request, what typically comes to our mind? Get request is used to fetch data from server, right?
Yeah, fetch data from the server.
Yeah, but my question to you is, using this get request, can I post data to a server?
No, I cannot.
I will say I can.
Okay.
Why it is possible? Because see, generally the convention is get request doesn't have like a request body. Leave the request body part. Let's say the server understands the get request, right? Anyway, the understanding part is just a piece of code written in the server, right? Understanding the get request, and it's going to, what if that request understands something and it's going to anyway insert a new data into a database, right? Even though it's a get request, right? I'm posting something into a database in this scenario. I'll give you one small example. See, I'll show you something. You don't need to understand every part of this, but try to relate. Okay. I was talking about the endpoint, right? This is a typical server code. Okay. So this is where the code like read a request that is coming from the client and process all the data for you, right? Now where the request initially comes to is into server is called a area called controller, right? You don't worry about what code is written here. Just worry about the few parts which I'm showing you. So this is the endpoint for the controller. When I hit API/v1/admin, right? The request that I'm sending from the browser is going to come to this part of the code in the server. Okay. Now, what request is that? Let's say if it's a GET request, it will search for any GET operation called GET mapping here. Okay. Now, GET mapping has another endpoint called /app. So let's say my domain is https www.sample.com. Okay, some random site I have created and registered in DNS. And my endpoint I'm giving here is API/v1/admin, API/v1/admin, right? And the GET request endpoint here is app, right? App. This is the URL which I'm using, right? This is a GET request. It's considered this as a GET request. Okay. Now, if I hit this endpoint, obviously the controller will read the request, and that request will come to this method, right? This is actually method, right? This is a method with a return type of response entity, and a method name is find all apps. Here I'm just finding something from the database and returning it. But before returning it, what if I post something to a database? Using some piece of code I'm typing here. What if I'm posting something or inserting some new record into database? Is it possible or not with the code that if I'm going to write it here? Possible, right? Then why we are saying GET request should only return the data, not post in data to a database?
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Because it's all a convention, right? It's a standard, it's a convention. Right? Technically, it is possible to post the data into a database using a GET request, but generally we don't do that because it's a convention. So, but in some rare cases we do also, right? There might be some situation where any GET request comes, we wanted to put some data into database, we do that also. But general convention in the GET request is to get some data from the database, right? Similarly, in your example, when you get 401 unauthorized, that means response is sent as unauthorized. That means code is written in such a way that 401 has to be returned for you. In that case, I can return 200 also for you. That is also possible. For example, see, I have written response entity dot return response entity dot OK. OK is 200. I can also return something like that. Something like the response entity dot. You see this? I have not found, accepted, bad request, no content. Everything's there, right? Not found is what? 404. Accepted is, I think 201, 202 something, right? Bad request is what? So 400. So I can return any status for you. It's up to totally in my control who is going to write the code in the server, right? But I can process your data also.
Okay, got it. Yeah, right now, yeah.
Right. So it's not like just because I received some other, as a tester, what we should understand is it's not like some kind of strict 100% of the times that this is only going to happen. Why I'm getting 401, but the intent of this is some other thing, right? It all depends upon what code the developer is writing inside of the application. So you might also assume if you are getting a wrong kind of status code or status description, it is possible that it is a bug also, right? It's not a right status code to return. Right?
Yeah, now I can relate it because after I raising the concern, they say that no, the server, like the base URI has been changed, so that's why you are getting. So that means the status code they have written in the code base is different. Now I got it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So it is all just some convention. It's not like strictly technically you cannot achieve all these things. You can achieve anything, but it's a convention to do certain things in a certain way. So the status code, coming back to status code. I mean, you can maybe post this link here. You can read all these things. But I just wanted to cover important. Someone was asking as a testers, we can raise a bug that standard. Yes, of course. There are many discussions that used to happen in our team also, whether whatever status code that we are depending is right or not with that context, right? So all the times discussions happen. As a QA, we can also raise that concern and get the right status code.
Sir, I have one doubt.
Mhm.
Okay, but you went too fast in that, so I could not ask.
Okay.
But so doubt is, sir, the endpoint thing that is, I guess, very important in understanding of
Yeah.
APIs, right?
Mhm.
So how do we decide that, okay, this is a endpoint? I mean, because as the name suggests, I always think like whatever is the end on the URL, so that might be endpoint. So I don't have complete understanding of that. So
Okay.
how we are saying that, okay, this is endpoint.
Okay. I had the same question when I started to develop knowledge on these areas. Actually, see, I'm running a website. Okay, let's say I'm running. Let's get to some basic scenario. Running a school or college where I wanted maintain some student database in my server or database, right? Let's say the domain that I have purchased is HTTPS myschool.com. Okay. Now, this is something which you have purchased based on the availability of domain name or whatever, and you have registered the DNS. But when I hit home page, we generally hit, this is optional to hit this slash forward slash. But when I hit something like this is called home route. Okay. When I don't give any of the thing here, this is called home route. So it will typically take us to a home page of the particular website or whatever it is, right? For example, if I wanted to see all the students in my school, as a developer, how I will design an API or REST API in such a way, like I will just say students as a GET request, right? So this is a, understand, if I this is a GET request, this purpose is to get all students. Okay. Now, if I wanted to get any one particular student's details based on its ID, now how can I design my endpoint? Can anyone say? This is common, obviously.
So I guess after student, we can give one more slash and then the ID of the student, because
right.
it's a route, so it's a home route. So by that way, I think we can achieve.
Home route is only this. Okay, don't confuse home route with others. This is called home route. This is students route, students controller and students route. So I'm passing the ID here. This is to typically get. This is a GET request again. Get student detail by its ID, right? So what if I wanted to insert a new student record in my database? Now what can be the endpoint? Can anyone say? This is common again. Okay. Typically, as a developer, how I will think is, I will again design endpoint like student. Okay. But this time, this is not going to be GET request, it's going to be a POST request with a request body. The request body information will contain all the student details. The endpoint is the same, right? But the method is different. Getting it, students. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Now, if I wanted to modify any student detail that is already in the database, what should I do?
We can like create a new thing, or we can add new.
Again, I'm going to use this endpoint.
Yeah, request.
Sorry.
We can use put or patch.
Yeah. The endpoint is again going to be the same, but this time method is different, put or patch. So it's going to redirect to the appropriate method in our server, and the editing of this particular data will be there. Again, it will contain a request body, put or patch, to let the server know what data is modified, right? Now, I want to delete some data. Now, what should I do? What is the endpoint that I should use?
Again, delete method, but with again the ID or whichever.
Yes, right. Again, the same endpoint, but only the method is different. Delete, right? Now you're getting how the API is actually designed. Now, if I wanted to add some teachers or whatever, right? Students we have added. What about what about the same process that I'm going for teachers, right? If I want to get a list of all teachers, I'm going to, as a developer, I'm going to design a new endpoint. Instead of students, I'm going to call this as a teachers, okay? And so on. And it goes on and on as your application grows, right? So for every purpose in this particular website that you are going to do, you will have different endpoints. Getting it? Where I'm getting it?
Yes.
With the different operations, different methods, right? HTTP methods. So depending upon which, you will do certain operations or you will get some data from the server or whatever. Right? Now, should this endpoint name students, should be students, it can be anything, it can be XYZ, it can be ABC, right? But giving it a proper name tells everything, right? And that is also a proper API design. Right?
Yes. Yes. Clear. Thank you.
So this designing a right kind of API is also important. So you asked me, right, where to know all these things. So you have to ask your manager or developer or whatever, hey, what are the endpoints that are available in our database and how to test that, right? Generally nowadays what they do is like you have something called Swagger. There are tools available to document all these APIs. What are all these all the APIs available in our my application or database system, whatever. Have you heard of this tool called Swagger?
Yes.
Similarly, there are other such API documentation. We call this as an API documentation tool, right? Right. So even you can hit this API in the same tool, and you can check very basic scenarios, all those things. So this API documentation tools will contain the endpoint information, query parameters, what is the request method or request body or whatever, and it's going to have complete documentation what this HTTP request is going to do.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, sir.
So, or any other document, any other word or whatever document that your team might put, but it's very, very important. When I was working as a tester, developers doesn't used to generally give all load information, initial phases of release of your features and all those things, right? As a tester, it's responsible for us to get all this information from the developers and start to write our API kind of things in the prior starting phase of testing itself. Very, very important. But before proceeding further, why this API is even required? Why we have UI automation, UI testing, and we also have APIs. But why API is nowadays prominent?
Because of client server, architecture in which these days apps are being developed.
Oh, client server architecture was for ages actually. Right? It's not like client server is only here. Even before 20-30 years, so there was client server architecture. It's not that.
To make easy access from one place to another place.
Okay, but not quite the answer that I'm expecting.
Yeah, hi, can I make a try?
Yeah.
See, UIs would not show the entire data which is being served from the server, and there are other status codes also. But if we test the API, we exactly know what is happening behind UI. So we'll get more accurate information and testing would be better.
Exactly the answer which I was looking for, right? We call that as a data integrity. Okay. So it's always important to leave the UI part. UI, many things can happen. Even your JavaScript code can modify the data. Your application can choose to show only certain amount of data, certain data, right? But we cannot per se say that 100%, hey, this is the right data that we are receiving for the request, right? But there only API comes to picture. Data integrity is very, very important. We have to assure that irrespective of whatever happening in the UI, the backend is right. backend is fine, right? Other things are maybe covered in your typical day-to-day UI manual testing part, but this data that is actually coming from the server is very, very important, right? But integrity or truthfulness of the data is very, very important. So we have to have a API kind of testing. Okay? So coming to, okay, before going to that class.
And sir, one more thing. During status code, while you were explaining 300 status code, so you gave one example of savan.com,
Yeah.
right? So can't that savan.com only can change it to geosavan.com? That why do we need a method for that?
No, it's not method. Okay. See, what happens is, I'll show you that code also for you. You have redirection service.
No, my question was that why redirection we need? I mean, why can't we just like say example like google.com is there. If I want to make like say my name that bipin google.com, so I can just rename it. Why can't I rename it? Why do I have to do navigation?
No, it's not like, for example, before this geosound.com, right? People were hitting the 7.com. 7.com was default go-to website, okay?
Yeah.
But obviously, Geo is owner of the 7.com actually, right?
Yeah.
So they wanted to establish the brand name by saying it's a geosound.com. But there are maybe millions of places in your local mobile application, browser history, your bookmarks, your wherever you have saved your typical websites, design, whatever. What if there is a 7.com there? People hit that 7.com, but it not take them to anywhere. Obviously, people will get frustrated about, hey, is 7 down. Obviously, Google is there, Googling is there, but still, you're getting my point, right? So anyway, 7.com domain is also owned by Geo. Geo7.com is owned by Geo. I wanted to rename this website, rename this domain, right? But at the same time, I don't want to use the existing user, current set of users, right? So in this kind of situation, redirection is very, very important. I'll give another example of redirection. You know the URL shortener service, right? We are developing actually URL shortener service for our application, right? This is one such example. Why do we need a URL shortener? First, important obvious purpose is to shorten the content length so that we can post very in a small manner in any social media, Twitter, or especially Twitter, where a number of factors very, very crucial, right? And apart from that, what is the purpose of using a short URL?
Like user can click on that,
User, you can know the metrics, how much clicks happened, who is clicking, and all those things, right? From which location they are clicking. Location information can be got from the IP address, what browser, OS name, everything can be got from something called user agent. If you go to the any website, you can see all those things. For example, say I'm going to 7.com, right? It's going to redirect me to Geo7, 301 redirect. This is something called user agent information. Can you see here? Right? This is Chrome browser and Apple kit. I'm using a Mac. So all this information will be sent from your request back to your application, so that we can start an analytics and better know what kind of users I'm actually clicking this for targeting, right? And again, see, if you see this redirection, you can see this in the headers. We can see something called location, right? Location only say I'm saying like, hey, redirect to the particular website, right? Same thing I'm doing in this piece of code, right? This is actually shortened URL service that we are generating, right? The request is coming as an HTTP servlet request. What I'm doing with the request is, in the response, I'm setting the header as header key as location, and the actual value as the actual URL that I wanted to redirect. Okay. So I'm setting this and sending back the response and sending the status code as 301. right? Now that browser will know, hey, this is 301, and there's something called location in the header, and read that location value and try to redirect the URL to the particular location. This is the piece of code that is actually happening in your servers also to handle your redirection. Right? See else, it says return 404 and not 4.
Yeah, sir, I got it. This one. But in addition to this only, I understand that you are saying that geo.com, sound.com did not rename it directly there because they might lose their users, because those who are
Right.
trying on geo.com,
Yeah.
for them it will come not found. But
Yeah.
I'm asking, like, let's suppose that I have some website with me, okay, and I am only using it, but I got bored with that domain name. So now I want to change that domain name only. So for me, using that navigate,
You don't want redirect in this case. Totally up to you. Change the domain name and so
okay, that's what I was asking. That we can change on the fly also, right?
Yes, yes. Not on the fly. Again, you have to purchase the domain, register with the DNS register, domain entry, DNS records, and all those things. So you have to do that configuration and access the same application via different domain.
Okay. It's just a facility so that we can navigate our user for larger.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
So again, I'm getting that what is actually happening in the behind scenes, right? So again, these are conventions. Right? Again, coming to 5xx series, what's the internal server error? Any error that is not able to be trackable, or some random error that is happening in the code base or whatever, not able to process the data. Maybe, for example, if you encounter null pointer exception, most probably you'll get an internal server error, right? Now, what's a bad gateway? What if server is redirecting or restarting, right? You'll get a bad gateway. It's not able to find a gateway for your request to be served, right? And again, service unavailable, right? Server is somewhere down and all those things. It's not able to serve the proper output for you, right? Service available. What is this gateway time? Very, very important concept to know.
And when server is taking some time to load and to respond some data.
So you cannot infinitely wait for server to respond, right? In the server side, even the client side, there is some default timeout set. Yes. So that within that time, if server is not responding, we'll get final for gateway time. Okay. This gateway timeout is will also come if thousands of requests hit the server parallelly at the same time. And obviously, these are common status codes. You can post up this link in the chat. You can define. So let's take a small example. This is some endpoint which I have to get to the health of particular application running. Okay. Forget about what this website is all about. This is a GET request. This is the endpoint, right? So I'm hitting it. We'll get the response, right? It says success. Okay. I'm using a Postman. I can do the same via browser, right? I'm going to get the same response, success, right? It's a GET request. Can I do a POST request or PUT request in the browser? Is it possible?
Yeah, we need to enter values in the checkboxes.
Can you do a POST request in the browser?
No.
No. It's no, right? It's possible if you have some add-ons here, right? There are some Chrome plugins or add-ons to mimic your Postman kind of environment inside browser itself. Otherwise, even Postman used to be a, Chrome add-on. I hope you are aware of all those things. Postman, I'm actually very, very impressed with Postman actually, because it started as a very simple application to develop and use. Now it's a $1 billion startup, right? It's a unique one. Everyone uses it. Postman started as a small Chrome plugin or error. And now only it's a standalone application. Okay, so in a typical browser, post and put and delete request is not possible, only get request is possible, whereas in Postman it is possible. Right? Now, I wanted to get the same response by hitting this URL in this terminal window, black window. Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible.
How? What should we do?
Using put method.
Something
You need some
called as
utility.
Perl, like
Yeah.
Perl.
Right?
Yeah.
Something called curl. I'll use something called get.
And then that link.
Right? It's a success, right? Response we got that. So this is also one of the utility in the command line to get the same API response. Whatever you saw in the browser, whatever you saw in the Postman, you can achieve the same using curl also. There are other utilities like in typical Linux, and I mean there's something called wget. But curl is very, very popular and famous. Okay. So
what is the -6? Is a comment?
It's an argument. Yeah, there are various purposes of this small arguments in the command line. Right? I'll let you know like what are these things like in data. There are so many commands and arguments. I'll maybe post that the link for you. You can check this. I mean, like anyone worked on this, like how a command line argument works, what's a command line and all those things. I hope you are aware of. Not only with respect to curl, even you can access Git and all those things. Git has so many command line functions and arguments and flags, right, for various purposes.
Yes.
You can read about it. Okay.
Thank you.
So I hope you are able to relate about basics of client-server architecture, how a request is processed and how the data is fetched and from where it is fetched and given back to the client and what is actually happening in the background. I hope you got some basic idea, right? We'll stop this session with this, right? If you have any questions related to what this course is all about or whatever it is.
Karthik, just a small question. Actually, for the end of the training session, this whatever maybe after completes, can we able to work with can able to create one project?
Yes, of course. That is the aim of this session, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Karthik, this is what the, as we know, this was the training session. So what about the exact trainings? This was the demo session. So what about the duration of the training session?
Including this trainings, it will be typically lasting for 7 to 8 weeks.
Okay? 7 to 8 weeks, okay.
Yeah. In the weekends, Saturday, Sunday, 2 hours each. Okay? Okay. We'll be covering basics of, we already saw client-server architecture. And we'll be seeing in depth of all the API components, authorization, authentication, headers, request headers, request body, and query parameters, and all those things, how it's actually functioning. Right? And we will simulate all these things, whatever we did manually in Postman. And we will do the same thing using Newman. Then we'll see about test assured, how it is actually helpful in automating the APIs and all those things we'll see. And we after completing the session, we'll see about Cucumber and how we can actually integrate the session with Cucumber to create an API automation framework and to create a small API project for yourself, right? And if possible, then and there, as we progress on the course, I said that the server code that we are activating. I'll also try to relate the server code with you, maybe that you know how to create a small server. It's very simple code. Don't confuse with all these things. These are doing many other things, right? Creating a simple server for CRUD operations, we will see that also.
Okay, okay.
That is the scope of this course.
Hello.
Hi, Karthik.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Karthik. Yeah, one more thing I want to ask regarding 400 and 404.
Mm-hmm.
If you said if the URL is typed incorrectly, then it should be a 400 or 404.
It is 404.
Okay, so when will get bad request?
For example, let's say you are posting some data in the database, right? Using some post request and all. What if the data is not in the right format? For example, in the request body, they're expecting a number, you're providing a string. You're getting it right. They also do some kind of validations in the server side, the data that you're sending from the client side, right? If the data is not up to the standards or not the right data, they'll throw you 400 validations.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Karthik, I have a question here. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question here. We could see the GET APIs, returning a response entity to the browser. So does that response entity type gets converted to the JSON? And
Yes.
subsequently wanted to know, is the response entity the standard way of return type, or there can be other return type?
No, there can be other return types also. There can be a string, there can be a class you can return. All these things are converted to a JSON defaultly this is a Spring framework actually, by a framework called Jackson. Okay, Spring uses a framework called Jackson to convert all these Java objects into a JSON format and bring it back to the client.
And just in case it is returning, two classes or the two objects, then would the response entity would suffice, or there would be an
how it will return two objects?
For example, you are fetching data from two different student class, or probably you can say the department class, and you are combining those two data and sending as a return.
But you're combining the two data, but ultimately you're combining all the data and send it as a single response only, right? Getting it? You're combining two classes and put it to a third class and returning the third class. That is how we do. Okay. And these typical third classes are called data transfer objects, or DTOs.
DTOs. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Hi, Karthik.
Yes.
A quick question. So, I mean, in this course, will you cover, in REST assured, we have to handle, we are sending payloads as a part of the post call, right?
Yeah.
So, sometimes especially in banking applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
The payloads that we have are huge. Like
Okay.
huge JSON payloads. So in that case, the library which you mentioned, like Jackson library, which converts for serialization and deserialization, like POJOs and all. So that would be hard to maintain, POJOs, setting getters and setters. So how to handle and these Jackson, this huge JSON files, and we have to compare two JSON files and say, for example, we have one JSON 1 and JSON 2. And we have to compare these two JSONs like a JSON match, but the attributes are nested. I mean, in one, the nesting is different in both the JSONs, and we need to do a comparison. And also there is a mapping between the two. Say the value in JSON 1 is A and value in JSON 2 is A plus 2. So in few fields there might be some mapping, and few might be like 1-to-1 mapping. So those kind of cases, real-time cases, will you cover? Will you help us?
Yes. And typically in the case, I would suggest you to convert to a POJO. Okay. I know getters and setters is a very cumbersome process, but there's a workaround for that. There is some library called Lombok. Okay.
Yeah, that is true. Lombok is there, but I mean, when you are setting a POJO class, you have to set the values of those.
No, you don't have to set, right? This Jackson is directly responsible for example, I can just say something. I will show you one example.
Okay.
Just now today only I typed the code for it.
Okay.
See, I can just JSON data is only coming here. Okay, okay. When I hit this, JSON data will come, but I don't need to do anything. See, I'm putting an API request, right? The responses are actually JSON data. What I did is I just convert this as a string. Okay.
Yeah.
If you see this, yeah, this is string, right? This initialized a string called geo info details. This entire JSON response I've converted as a string. And if you wanted to like deserialize, I just have to do something like this. I just have to give the top class, which holds all the inner classes, right? And I just say this mapper is coming from the Jackson framework, object mapper. This is coming from, if you see, form.fastXML Jackson data frame, right? I just have to say mapper.read value. What is the JSON string and what is the class you are going to deserialize? That's it. Everything is taken care by Jackson.
Okay.
Okay, so now this Jackson is converted into this Java class. And
Yeah.
the information, this is a very small Java class, obviously, but the information is populated. We're getting it. Even you have nested classes and nested Java objects, everything will be populated with the help of Jackson. You don't have to use setters explicitly in this case.
Okay, like so in one of my project, I mean, it was a huge payload. Okay, I converted those into POJOs, and there were like 10 POJO classes for that payload. So now
Also, you
if
have to create those POJOs, but to deserialize, it's an online code.
If you are to send these, if you have to send it in a post call, the POJO, then in that case, you don't have to use setters because the values in that you have to set, right? So that's what I was.
No, again, you can construct that the request body or whatever, right? And convert to a string and directly use an object mapper or Jackson to convert to the particular object. That's it. Just I will explore about Jackson right, in our classes. It's very, very useful library to do many things very, very easy.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question that you might have? And I hope this session was helpful and useful.
So this was the first session, right?
Right.
So for the next weekend, so this will be continued on Saturday and Sunday at the same time slot, right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So Karthik, this framework that we are going to build for API automation, will this be using TestNG or using JUnit or Cucumber? You mentioned Cucumber, right? JUnit.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Someone was also asking questions. No.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So will you be exploring the rest assured also? Rest assured automation?
Yes. So, if there's no any other questions, can we close the session then?
I think I have one doubt. Will you cover Swagger also in this?
No.
Okay.
Just try to touch upon basics, not the part of the main.
Okay.
I don't have any hardcore documentation of the topics covered. Whatever I said, like the other topics actually, right? We cover the manual APIs and how components and those things, POSTMAN, Newman, and collections, frameworks, and all those things we'll see. And we'll also see about serialization, deserialization, POJOs, and rest assured creating a library. Maybe in the next demo session, I will present you with the complete steps. I don't have currently the document open.
Karthik, one question from my side. So, I mean, is there something which we can, go go through in order to come for the next class? Like, are there some proper prerequisites which are required, like apart from the fact that you should know Java, this and that, but in order to attend the next
Necessary,
class?
but for rest assured, you might have to know Java. This is not a entire Java.
Yeah,
learning
that's
plan.
that's fine. But in order to attend the next class, or in order to get a better understanding of what we are currently doing, so is there a requirement of getting through something?
No, just whatever
Is
we
there some
saw today. Just
documentation which we need?
no. Like, whatever we saw today, just Google it and try to understand the kind of size that what we just saw today. Thanks for architecture.
One request, Karthik. Actually, we attended Selenium classes from the same wa2automation.com, and we know that knowledge of Java, which is related to which is used for Selenium only. See, that is enough. Or otherwise, we have to brush up same other things.
No, basic Java knowledge is fine.
Basic core Java is enough, is what you're telling.
Enough. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. And one more thing, in this sessions, in this project, data-driven also will cover, right?
Yes.
Thanks,
So,
thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Karthik, this is Dinah here. When we said that we'll be using the Cucumber framework, so when we use the Excel or JSON file, is it like through Cucumber? We are not just using the parameters to pass the data; it would be used through an external file.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cool. I think I hope this was very useful for you people. Right? Thank you for joining. We'll again see in the next session coming Saturday. Right?
Thanks, Karthik.
Thanks, Karthik. It was a good session.
Thank you.